There's the chalkboard. I'm going to move closer to it here in a minute. So if we go back to the time of Christ, a couple thousand years ago, they didn't speak English in England. The few people who were there spoke a language called Celtic, and that language is just about erased from the earth right now. There are hardly any vestiges of it left. Part of that is because England got invaded by the Roman Empire. They came there a few years after Jesus died, and of course they spoke Latin, and they were there for a few centuries. So that's why some of our English language has Latin in it. When we get up closer to the year 500, the mid 400s, some people came over from Germany. They were a couple of tribes, the Angles and the Saxons. So that gives us Old English. And I will share with you on Classroom a recording of what that sounded like. It sounds more like German than like English, or it sounds like something out of the Lord of the Rings, and you will not understand it at all. That's Old English. And so that starts a little before 500, and that's what people spoke for 500 years or so. I've made a very definite year for the division between Old English and Middle English, and that year is 1066. If you look at your timeline that you guys made for each other, and if you did a good job of that, you will know why. Because in 1066, William the Conqueror came from France, from a part of France called Normandy, and invaded England. That's called the Norman Conquest. They took over, and as a result, the rulers of England for the next about 300 years spoke French. So you have this mixing going on over those centuries between Old English and French, and the result is Middle English. I'll also give you a recording of some of that, and you might be able to understand some of the words of that. Middle English is getting much closer to what we speak. So that is a Germanic language with a French overlay. And it is changing and evolving all the time, but that changing starts to slow down toward the end of the 1400s for a couple of reasons. One is the printing press. The printing press was invented in 1476, and that allows books to become more widely distributed. Once you have the language going into writing and getting distributed, it starts to get locked in place, and a dominant form of that language starts to spread widely. Also, the country of England is becoming more unified with a stronger central government by 1500. And so that allows for London English to become the language. So as we move past 1500, we are actually in what is called modern English. And there is my laughable picture of William Shakespeare, who lived from 1564 to 1616. So Shakespeare did not write in Old English. Old English is way back here. Shakespeare wrote in early modern English. I know that doesn't make it easy to understand him, but it does tell us that this is our language. This is getting pretty close to the language that we use today. There have been, of course, many changes since then, many of which you covered in your timeline. But there's our context. We are reading a writer who wrote in the early modern English period. Thank you.